Okay, time for us to get started. Number 83 we'll sing. Number 83 before our Bible class tonight, In the Hour of Trial. A lot of what we'll be talking about in our lesson, finishing up the lesson that we're on, will have to do with David during his trials and difficulties running from Saul. We'll sing all three verses and get Buddy to lead us in prayer after this. In the hour of trial, Jesus, plead for me, lest by base denial I depart from thee. When thou seest me waver, with a look recall, nor for fear or favor suffer me to fall. With forbidden pleasures would this vain world charm, or its sordid treasures spread to work me harm. Bring to my remembrance sad Gethsemane, or in darker semblance cross-crowned Calvary. Should thy mercy send me sorrow, toil, and woe, or should pain attend me on my path below, grant that I may never pass to thee. Grant that I may ever cast my care on thee.
Our Father in heaven, we are thankful for this day. Father, we are thankful for this time that we have to come together and to open up your holy word and to study, Father. We pray that you would be with us this evening as we study. We pray, Father, that you would help us to gain the knowledge and understanding that you would want us to gain from these lessons. We pray, Father, that you would help us to understand your will and to make application in our lives. Father, we are mindful of those that are not able to attend, not able to assemble, those that are feeling bad. We pray, Father, that you would be with them and encourage them and comfort them as only you can. Father, we ask that you go with us now as we begin this service. Be with Jeff as he presents the material and help us as the audience, the listeners, to be able to take those things that are said and apply them to our lives. Father, we ask that you would protect us from evil. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. See what we're on lesson 6. We're actually on page 18, about to start the discussion. I think we may have covered question 1. I certainly seem to remember us reading parts of Psalm 7. Maybe we just had reference to it. We're going to read it. Turn to the 7th Psalm. 3 psalms in connection to the characters we're looking at in this lesson, Doeg, Cush, and the Ziphites. This first psalm, I believe, is about Doeg. No, Cush. Okay, Cush. So, we're not 100% sure who the Cush is. David writes about, it is about persecution. So, certainly we can understand that this is something that David faced during his times running from Saul. There's several possibilities as to who Cush is. Who was Saul the son of? Do you remember? Kish. K-I-S-H instead of C-U-S-H. But, you know, could be the same person with a slightly different spelling. It's possible. Some have suggested it's Shimei because of the words he speaks of the accusations, and Shimei had some terrible things to say about David when he was running from the rebellion of his son. Starts with a J. What son rebelled? Absalom. Absalom, not a J. It doesn't start with a J. It starts with the other J, the A. Okay, when you can't remember something, I do a good job of not remembering it. Some thought it might just be some unknown noble in Benjamin, somebody that we're not told about in other places. So somebody read the 7th Psalm for us. Go ahead. I'm gonna kind of change the way I do that because of the live stream so it can be heard. So let me read it with the microphone. O Lord, my Lord, in you I put my trust. Save me from all those who persecute me and deliver me, lest they tear me like a lion, rending me in pieces while there is none to deliver. O Lord, my God, if I've done this, if there is iniquity in my hands, if I have repaid evil to him who was at peace with me, or have plundered my enemy without cause, let the enemy pursue me and overtake me. Yes, let him trample my life to the earth and lay my honor in the dust. Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Lift yourself up because of the rage of my enemies. Rise up for me in the judgment you have commanded. So the congregation of the people shall surround you. For their sakes, therefore, return on high. The Lord shall judge the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to my integrity within me. O let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end. But establish the just. For the righteous God tests the hearts and minds. My defense is of God, who saves the upright in heart. God is a just judge, and God is angry with the wicked every day. If he does not turn back, he will sharpen his sword. He bends his bow and makes it ready. He also prepares for himself instruments of death. He makes his arrows into fiery shafts. Behold, the wicked brings forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealings shall come down on his own crown. I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness, and will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. So David says several things in here about persecution. We'll remember 2 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1 talks about the fact that there was a long war between David and the house of Saul. This is after the death of Saul. So there were certainly many of the family of Saul who would be enemies, like Shimei of David, and might have occasion to say terrible things about him. The idea of being in a situation in which he's being persecuted could refer to the rebellion of Absalom, but certainly could refer to this time that we're studying about in this lesson, where David is on the run from Saul prior to his death, prior to Saul's death. I guess we could also point out the fact, question 2 kind of examines the psalm more closely, how does David feel about the persecution Cush had been sending his direction? Okay. He knew that he had not done anything worthy of the treatment he was receiving. David speaks of being just and being righteous. Surely David had an understanding, as we should too, that doesn't necessarily mean that a person is perfect. God makes us righteous. And even in the old law, how were the Israelites able to be righteous under the old law? They didn't have the blood of Jesus. Pardon? By sacrifices. And that was, I guess you'd say, representative of what Jesus would do later. It was Jesus' blood, we talked about this many times, but we need to remember that reached back all the way to Adam and Eve, for that matter, for all those who were faithful to the law God gave them, just as it reaches forward to our time today, to those who are faithful to God's law under Christ. So Jesus doesn't have to die in every generation. His blood can not travel through time, but reach across time to forgive those and make them righteous. And so under the old law, they were made righteous in the same way. And I think there's a sense in which we would recognize the fact that though it was representative, in a sense, that David didn't die a sinful man. In other words, it wasn't David's sin stayed on him until Jesus died on the cross. No, if David was faithful, then David's sins were taken away. When God makes a promise, or when God makes a statement of a future event, it is as if it has already happened. It is so sure and so certain. We say about some things, you can take it to the bank. A man's word is his, what is his? His bond. Okay, so it's as good as done. You know, there's some people you can give them a job and you don't have to check it. You know it's going to get done, and so God is trustworthy like that. So I know that the book of Revelation in chapter 12 talks about Satan accusing the brethren before God day and night. Now, I believe that is Satan accusing these men for which a sacrifice technically had not been made yet, but God knew it was going to happen. God knew it was going to be done. And so God could act as if it had already happened. So David was certainly righteous and had made all the wrongs that he had committed in his life correct by God's law. And he's saying some pretty tough things. Let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. God is angry with the wicked every day. These are some things that I guess in some ways could be chilling to us when we reflect upon the times in our life when we're not right with God. If the wicked does not turn back, God will sharpen his sword. He bends his bow and makes it ready. He also prepares for himself instruments of death. He makes his arrows into fiery shafts. And God chastens us sometimes, doesn't he? God allows us to be tested. God allows us to be burdened by the troubles of life and maybe even by the unjust accusations of people who are mistaken about us, but they don't hesitate to launch their attacks nonetheless. And God sometimes allows us to go through that. He wants us to do what? During those times when we're unjustly accused of doing something we've not done, what does he want us to keep our minds fixed on? What are some ideas that get us through that time without losing our faith? Prayer, but what are some principles? That's right. We're going to a better place. All wrongs will be made right, if not in this life, in the next. If not in this moment, maybe later in life, but I need to be patient. I need to recognize that God has greatly blessed me. I don't deserve what I've received to this point in my life. I can't complain about some bump in the road, some problem that I'm facing right now, when God has blessed me for 65 years. You know? So 66, okay. Fixed to be 67. I was rounding it down. It's always funner to round it down. I tell you what, these brethren, they will not let you get away with anything. So anyway, I have to recognize the good that God has done for me, and that whatever happens to me from this point forward in my life, I'm a blessed man. So keep my eye fixed on Jesus. Hebrews, is it 12:2? Keep my eyes fixed on Jesus, who's the author and finisher of my faith, and recognize that there is that better place. James?
Well, it's a good thing that he gave us the book of Job to read.
Yeah.
To have an attitude of when all is against you, still pray to God and thank God. When things don't go your way, we pray that if it be thy will, things will go the way they're going. And having the attitude that this life here is so short and temporal that it means, like, 100 years is nothing for us compared to eternity.
That's right.
Like the Bible tells us, don't fear the one that can kill you with the sword. Fear, the one that can kill your soul.
Each family kind of has different sayings. I remember we used to say you can put up with anything for a little while. Maybe a few hours, may even be a few days or a few weeks, but you know there's going to be relief on the other side. So you recognize that as a principle that's part of this as well. I love the statement he makes early on in this. O Lord, verse 3, if I have done this, if there is iniquity in my hands, if I have repaid evil to him who was at peace with me, or have plundered my enemy without cause, let the enemy pursue me. What he's saying is, if I need to reap what I have sown, I will accept that. David made the statement toward the end of his life when he called for the census and God was going to punish the Israelites, and God gave him a choice. I don't remember all the choices. 3 days running from, it's 3 months, I think, running from man. But there was then 3 days punishment from God, something along that line. David's point that he made was, I don't want to put myself in the hands of man. I want to put myself in God's hands. And so God initiated a plague, and David offered a sacrifice that ended the plague later under the direction of God's prophet. But David's saying here that if I've done something wrong, I accept that. And that's really hard to do when you're under a lot of pressure and you're suffering an unjust situation. We often forget the wrongs we have done. We can pick out a little bitty portion of what's happening that's unjust. I may have done a big bad thing over here that I did, and I forget about that. And I notice the little bitty thing that he said against me that he shouldn't have said. It's smaller than what I did, but it's that log and splinter thing that, you've got a log in your eye and you're trying to get the splinter out of the other guy's eye. And that's what we sometimes do, and we have to recognize that usually when there's a really serious scrap between two people, it is rare in which there is someone that's completely innocent of anything. That may not be exactly true, but oftentimes you find guilt on both sides. That's what frustrates me. When you're working with brethren and you would like to find a good guy here to defend, but both of them, when young people may have a marital problem and you can't pick out a good guy here. I mean, both of them are guilty of doing this and doing that, and by the time it gets to, come before the church, or the elders are involved or the preacher's involved, both of them have plenty of sin that has taken place to this point. And each is pleading their case as if to say that, yeah, but my sin is not as bad as his sin. David's here is acknowledging if he's done something wrong. And Paul makes a statement in Acts 25 and verse 11, if I've done anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. I think he was talking to Agrippa. So David had a really good attitude about this. He also asked, what qualities of God does David mention in this psalm, which are the basis of his hope and trust? So we look at, I'm looking at which verses, 7, 8. The Lord is a judge, okay? And he judges righteous judgment. He is a savior of the upright. God is a shield, my defense, verse 10, who saves the upright. So these are the things that God is to David and was to David and should be to us that help us to hold on during times like that. Any other thoughts about Psalm 7? Oh, let's. Yep.
Another song that clicks right in with that is 91, and he talks in that, and this isn't accredited to David, but it says similar. He says, "My God in whom I trust, He's my refuge and my fortress," and it also uses the phrase about His faithfulness is a shield and bulwark. In other words, it's the same thing again. So whether this is David or perhaps Solomon writing this, that it doesn't matter how terrible the world is, I'm protected.
Yeah. I love the statement in Philippians 4. He says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. So the peace of God guards us. It's like a shield. It's like something that helps us. Be at peace with God. Make sure if you're in a disagreement with someone, and everybody's mad at everybody, make sure you're right with God. You can't walk with Him unless you're right with Him. So that's important. Let's turn to the 52nd Psalm, Psalm 52. This is the one, a contemplation of David when Doeg the Edomite went and told Saul and said to him, David has gone to the house of Ahimelech. And what a tragedy. We read about David. What did he go to? We read about this in 1 Samuel 21, where David received the showbread. He went to Ahimelech, who was a priest of God, and he received some of the showbread. What else did he receive? Sword of the Philistine. A shield too, or just the sword? Anyway, he received help from Ahimelech. And Saul is going to do a terrible thing. We'll read about that in just a moment. You may remember it. But let's look at this short psalm. Why do you boast in evil, O mighty man? The goodness of God endures continually. Your tongue devises destruction like a sharp razor working deceitfully. You love evil more than good, lying rather than speaking righteousness. You love all devouring words, you deceitful tongue. God shall likewise destroy you forever. He shall take you away and pluck you out of your dwelling place and uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, here is the man who did not make God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and strengthened himself in his wickedness. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever. I will praise you forever because you have done it. In the presence of your saints, I will wait in your name, for it is good. So David's talking about what a terrible fellow Doeg is. He is an Edomite. Well, the Edomites were descendants of Esau, and I guess you'd say they were cousins of the Israelites. Why did Doeg go to Saul and reveal where David was? Why did he do that? What was he hoping to gain? He was in the service of Saul. He's wanting to gain prestige in Saul's service, money, lands. You know, on one occasion, Saul is going to ask the question, to his soldiers, he goes on a little bit of a rant, and he says, is David going to give you lands and houses and things like that? And he's implying that, well, I can, but David can't. He's on the run. I'm your king. If you want houses and lands and lots of stuff, you need to stick with me. Don't go over to David. And nobody's even told me that my son is in league with David against me. And so this is what Doeg was wanting to get on Saul's good side for these reasons. And he makes a statement here that here is a man who did not make God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and strengthened himself in his wickedness. So let's look a little bit. You can keep your finger here, but turn back to 1 Samuel 22. 1 Samuel 22. So when Saul found out or heard from Doeg that David went to Ahimelech, Saul went to visit Ahimelech. And starting in verse 6, 1 Samuel 22, when Saul heard that David and his men who were with him had been discovered, now Saul was staying in Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in Ramah with his spear in his hand and all his servants standing about him. Then Saul said to his servants who stood about him, hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? All you have conspired against me, and there's no one who reveals to me that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse. There's not one of you who is sorry for me or reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servants against me to lie in wait as it is this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king and said to Saul, hear now, son of Ahitub. And he said, here I am, my lord. Then Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him that he should rise against me to lie in wait as it is this day? So Ahimelech answered the king and said, and who among all your servants is as faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, who goes at your bidding and is honorable in your house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servants or to any of the house of my father, for your servant knew nothing of all this, little or much. And what he's saying here is that, yes, I helped David. David was in your service. He is your son-in-law. I had no idea that this was something that was not according to your will. And he said, I've not done anything that is wrong. And the king said, you shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. Then the king said to the guards who stood about him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord. Now, can you imagine someone actually uttering those words? Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand, let me see. I lost my place. Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because he knew when he fled and did not tell it to me. But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. And the servants in this case are better men than Saul. That's sad. And the king said to Doeg, turn and kill the priest. So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priest and killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. Also Nob, the city of the priest, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men and women and children and nursing infants, oxen and donkeys and sheep with the edge of the sword. He couldn't kill all the Amalekites like God told him to. But when he stirred, he'll kill everything he can see. It's just an example of the fact that Saul did not obey God because Saul thought that Saul was good enough. Saul didn't need God. He didn't need God's commandments. Saul knew what he was doing. James?
The
They're from the desert area south of Palestine, in that area, we call it Gaza now, down in that area. And they are a nomadic people. It's a very sparsely populated area.
Who are they related to? Or not related to, where they come from in lineage?
Well, you know, I'm not sure. Sam, you did the study of the nations. You remember where the Midianites originated from?
You're talking about Midianites or Amalekites?
Amalekites, yes, thank you, Amalekites.
That description didn't sound right to me.
Yeah, but they are from that area.
The Amalekites, I believe what James was asking about. I don't remember off the top of my head. My guess would be it's one of the Canaanite groups. I'd have to go back and look.
But they are in that area between Palestine and Egypt. And they attacked the Israelites as they were going up towards the promised land.
Right.
And they would lay in the back, that's right. The ones who were sick and elderly, couldn't keep up with the main body of the Israelites, they would attack them. And they did attack and fight the Israelites as an army and lost. But yeah.
My concordance for my reference says that they're descendants of Esau. Genesis 36:12.
Okay, there you go. Descendants of Esau. Okay. So, and because of how they attacked the Israelites in such a despicable manner, God determined to destroy them all and commanded Saul to do that. But Saul didn't do it. But now he's killing everything that moves because he's angry about that. It's just pathetic.
And obviously Saul has a lot of low points, but this has got to rank him on the top.
Yes.
Obviously, he's not just killing people, he's killing innocent people.
Yes, that's
because
right.
They didn't know that they were helping out an outlaw. As far as they knew, David was on a king's mission. That's why they agreed to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and these are priests. These are people who serve the Lord. And Saul again has no qualms in his anger to unleash. I mean, it's notable to see that his men were not willing to
Yeah.
fight. But then Doeg, this Edomite, who probably has no regard for the priests of the Lord anyways, is willing to do it. So it's very, very sad and interesting dynamic as far as that goes. But it's definitely one of the worst things Saul ever commands for orders.
Yes. And you think about the quandary Saul put his people in. They didn't know what to do. There were rumors. People were saying all kind of things. They didn't know to help. I remember when David went to Ahimelech, and Ahimelech was kind of, David, what are you doing here by yourself? Why don't you have your weapon? Or, you know, I remember all the things that he said. But there were some things about it that made Ahimelech a little uneasy. But David gave him the report that he was on he was in the service of Saul. And he didn't use the word mission, but he was in the service of Saul. And he had to leave quickly, so that's why he didn't have his sword. And so he asked for help. And Ahimelech gave him help. But this is what Saul put his people. He should be leading the people as a leader, as a king. But instead, he's leaving the people to wonder, we don't know what to do. And so now Ahimelech and these other priests are caught in the middle, and Saul does something horrible. And it didn't have to be, because David was not really his enemy.
And also, you know, Saul was acting in a way which was erratic, and everyone in that surrounding area, they didn't know exactly what was going on inside the king's palace, you know, because he told them that Doeg had, you know, was in charge of all the ones that were in his household. That's why he was able to get Doeg and those in his household to go along with killing the priests and everything. So everybody else outside, they kind of knew he was something wrong, but they didn't know how.
Yeah, they heard rumors, but they didn't know what was true. And it's kind of sad. I thought I would put a map up for us. Here's Nob up here north of Bethlehem. Now, Jerusalem's not on the map because it's not conquered yet. David would conquer it later. It's called Jebus, but it's in the same area. But there's Nob, And David will flee down to this area of Moan in this area of Jeshimon. We'll read about that later on, but that's just the area that David is, and later he'll move up into the area closer to the Philistines later in his travels to try to escape Saul. So it's a sad situation, Sam.
Just maybe a quick aside about the story of Goliath here, because it's just kind of mentioned, and we don't know why it's there of
Yeah.
all places. It seems like, it almost seems random, happenstance. Obviously, God is working in mysterious ways to provide, David with some sort of protection by having this weapon here. But we don't get a lot of description about the sword when it talks about Goliath, when he first has a showdown with David. It talks about his armor and his spearhead, but it doesn't really talk about his sword very much. But it does say here, at this point, that, well, David says, it's in verse 9, that there is no sword like it. There's nothing else like it. It kind of gives you this idea it's a one of a kind. And when you think about the man Goliath himself, this may have been a custom-made blade for Goliath, which if you think about the size of a man like that, it's probably got a huge hilt. It's probably very well made. We do know the Philistines knew how to work iron in that time. That was their specialty more than anyone else in that region. So it's probably a very high-quality weapon, but probably very large and perhaps maybe a bit unwieldy
Yeah.
for an average person. We don't really know a lot of details about it, but it's a very remarkable sword. It's never talked about ever again.
Yeah.
So sometimes we don't know what happens to it after. Does David have it throughout his life? What happens to it later? We don't know. But God is definitely working here because what an odd thing to just happen to be here at this point. Of all the viewpoints we're looking at, these people looking at David, here's something that somebody should have picked up on, that, hey, God has made sure that David was able to acquire this weapon through very interesting means that he did not plan to do. There's absolutely something going on in the providence of God. I think it's really interesting.
I remember when David tried on Saul's sword and equipment, his uniform and equipment to fight Goliath, and it was too much for him because he was so small. So certainly afterwards he could have claimed everything of Goliath as his own, but he was a little boy then. It seems now that he's grown to an adult and is strong enough to wield it, maybe as a two-handed sword.
Yeah,
that would be.
It's like a long broadsword, like a clay sword.
These swords that are made not to be wielded with one hand, they're so heavy, and obviously their advantage is in their weight. But David's strong enough now that he can wield a sword like this and make use of it. And so I guess it's certainly better than nothing for him. And so David killed Saul, Doeg in particular, killed 85 priests on this occasion. And then he struck this city. And it was certainly a sad day, the lowest day, as he said, as Sam mentioned. Okay, we've kind of covered all of that. Number 4, what is, I'm on page 19 now, what is it David believes about God's character which gives him hope in the midst of suffering? We're back in the 52nd Psalm now. There are several here. I wrote down God's steadfast love, and I did not write the verse from which I got that. 8. Okay. So that would be one thing. There'd be several things that would give him hope during this circumstance. God is watching over David. David is ready to be reprimanded if he's done something wrong, and God is going to win out in the end. And so David has that confidence. As Christians, God has to be our North Star. God is like the air we breathe, And the moment we don't have him should be like the moment we can't breathe. You know, sure, we can hold our breath for a few minutes, but not long. And we know how valuable that would be, like water or anything like that. That's God to us. It should be to us. So we can't be without him anytime. Look at the 54th Psalm. This is to the chief musician with stringed instruments, a contemplation of David when the Ziphites went and said to Saul, is David not hiding with us? Now Saul is looking for David, and the Ziphites know where he's from. Ziph is in this area. It's not on this map. Maybe on the next map. Hang on. I'll put another map up there. Here's the wilderness of Ziph here. Here is, if you can see this through this, behind the scripture, there's the word Ziph there. There's Hebron. You see Nob up there. So this is the area of Maon, the wilderness of Maon. And there's Carmel, where Nabal will be in the next chapter. We'll read about him in the next lesson. He and Abigail live in Carmel, or near Carmel. He has a business in Carmel. So the Ziphites come to Saul and say, David is hiding in the wilderness near Jezimon. And Saul says, go back and make sure all the places he likes to go to, get his schedule, come back to me when you're sure, and I'll come with you. And so by that time, David has moved to the area just a little bit further south, to the very bottom of that map. And so these Ziphites came to Saul and I guess ratted on David and told where David was at.
Yeah. The Abigail that you mentioned, is that the same Abigail whose husband was a king, but he was not a good king?
Well, her husband is a scoundrel, and he acts like a king. In one verse, he says he throws a feast for himself like a king. He was not a king.
Is this the same Abigail that David comes back and eventually marries?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll read about that in the next lesson. All right. Save me, O God, by your name, and vindicate me by your strength. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen up against me, and oppressors have sought after my life. They have not set God before them. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is with those who uphold my life. He will repay my enemies for their evil. Cut them off in your truth. I will freely sacrifice to you. I will praise your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me out of all trouble, and my eye has seen its desire upon my enemies. It is tough to maybe understand some of these expressions of David, except we need to remind ourselves of the fact that these are life and death struggles. These are men who would not hesitate to put to death another person, good or bad, if it gets them what they want. And so we can understand when you are wronged in this way. Maybe you lose a loved one, they're put to death or something, or people that you know, and good people like priests are put to death. These are things that stir us to want justice. And God is not above bringing justice. God does it better than we, but there's nothing wrong with praying to God for justice. I understand, we hear people from time to time, the horrible thing that, your son is killed or your wife is killed, and the first thing you say is, well, I forgive him. And that certainly is commendable and understandable. We treat sometimes that as the only proper response, as if the person who calls for justice is being merciless. But that is not wrong. Now, God is the one who should render justice and not we. I know that the courts have to do that in a civil way, and the leaders have to do that for civil purposes. I'm not talking about that. We leave vengeance up to God, but there's nothing wrong with seeking God, through his justice, through his wisdom, to act in the right way to bring about justice. And so David was glad to see that his enemies were cast down. You know, I know that we look at the book of Job and we say that just because you're downtrodden doesn't mean you're a bad person. But that's not the same as wanting people who are bad people to reap what they sow. That's not. It doesn't always happen, but there's nothing wrong with asking for that to happen. So if your enemies do you wrong and you pray to God, may they reap what they're sowing. There's nothing wrong with that expression. But you're right, it doesn't always happen, and we have to be patient through those circumstances. If it doesn't happen in this life, it will happen in the next. God will not forget. See, if God doesn't forget even a cup of water that you give to a good thing that you do for someone, even such a simple thing as giving a cup of water, he won't forget that. He'll reward that. In the same way, God doesn't forget wrongs done either. Everything that is unforgiven, there'll be no secrets on the day of judgment. All secrets will be revealed like that. And so David is recognizing these strangers. The Ziphites are not Israelites. And I didn't think to look up the origin of the Ziphites and where they came from exactly. But David speaks of them as being strangers here. So they are ruthless men who did not set God before themselves. They did not seek to please God, in other words. But David said, God is my helper. He upholds those who support David's life. So one of the things you could say about David and Saul for sure is that people could look at David and see a man who was upright. And they could look at Saul and see a man who did not obey the commandments of God. Everybody saw the day he offered a sacrifice, and he's not allowed to offer sacrifices. Everybody saw the day he made excuses before Samuel, because that was in front of everybody. When Samuel said, what is the lowing of the sheep and the bleating of the sheep and the lowing of the cattle? I'm hearing. What's that all about? And then he began to lie and make excuses and speak as if the truth wasn't so. And everybody heard that. So they should have known. And David's saying the people who are trying to uphold my life are being upheld by God. And so we need to certainly always support those who are good. All right, any other thoughts about these Psalms? All right, we'll move into the next lesson. I guess let me just read this last key lessons here. We don't want to skip over those. When feeling persecuted by man, give your anxieties and cares over to the Lord. I read Philippians 4 and verse 6. Remember, the enemies of God will never win. And you know, I marked through that word never, and I said they will not ultimately win. That's, I think, a better way to say it. Sometimes, in the moment, it will seem like they won. And that's true. For the moment, there are times when the enemies of God will seem to win, but ultimately they will not win. King David had to trust and wait for the Lord's deliverance over his enemies, just as King Jesus had to wait for the Father to deliver him from his foes as he was raised from the dead. Wait on the Lord. Okay, good thoughts. Any other thoughts about these Psalms or this lesson? All right, we'll move into Nabal and Abigail's view of David, and we'll work on that lesson next Wednesday. Let's get our songbooks out. 279. He is able to deliver thee. We live in really peaceful times and are blessed in so many ways not to know the kind of world that David knew, the kind of world that many people in other places of our world today, in third world countries and places like that, they know a harsh and unrighteous and unfair world. And so it's hard sometimes for us to appreciate this a song like this. Whatever the circumstance you face, God is able to deliver you. The main thing is that we can't leave God, reject God, turn away from God, because he is, no matter what, able to deliver us. So we want to sing this song to encourage any who might need to obey the gospel. 279, let's sing all three verses. Let's stand and sing. 'Tis the grandest theme through the ages rung, 'tis the grandest theme for a mortal tongue, 'tis the grandest theme that the world e'er sung. Our God is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Though by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. 'Tis the grandest theme in the earth o'ermain, 'tis the grandest theme for a mortal strain, 'tis the grandest theme, tell the world again. Our God is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Though by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. 'Tis the grandest theme, let the tidings roll to the guilty heart, to the sinful soul. Look to God in faith, he will make thee whole. Our God is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. He is able to deliver thee. Though by sin oppressed, go to him for rest. Our God is able to deliver thee. Let's bow our heads, get James to lead us in a closing prayer, and then we'll have an announcement or two.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we have so many things to be thankful for. Most of all, we're thankful for your Son, Jesus Christ. God, we're so thankful for the growth of the church here at this local congregation. We are so thankful to have grown and have members baptized here to make this congregation stronger. We pray, Father, that you continue to be with Sister Tina as she is sick and struggling. We pray, if it be thy will, you return her to a minimum amount of strength so she can be here to work with us at the next point in time. Father, we are so thankful for Sister Pat as she continues to grow and learn your word. She is truly an encouragement to us. We pray that you continue to encourage her. Father, we pray that you continue to be with Brother Morris as he is struggling with a small amount of bad health. We pray that it be thy will, you be with him so that he can be able to worship here with us in spirit and truth. Father, all of us here at this local congregation that are mature and of an older age and are aging, we pray that you continue to be with all of us and give us strength as we continue to worship thee in spirit and in truth. In these things we ask in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Let's continue to keep Tina in prayer. She's continuing to struggle with her vertigo and with her stomach issues. Continue to keep Tony in your prayers, and Tim. His situation's relatively unchanged. Arnold sees a doctor Friday, and we'll kind of get the results of a lot, if not all, of the tests that they've been running. So let's keep him in our prayers. Who else do we need to mention? I'll be out of town for the next couple of days, so please pray for me. I'm going up to visit my dad, Mississippi, and I'll be back Friday evening. Nothing else, then we're dismissed, and hope y'all have a safe time until I see you again.